What is extremely rare but people think it's very common?
Casting director here. Having a career in acting. I don't mean being famous. I mean paying your bills with acting alone. I would hazard being an exclusively working actor is about 1% of actors. But the amount of people still going into acting tells me people think otherwise.
I'm guessing the same is true for musicians.
People are always surprised when I say my dad is a musician. They're like, what, for a living? My parents met working at a restaurant in the 80s. My mom was a waitress and my dad was a busboy. She heard him play the guitar and told him, move in with me, quit bussing tables and focus on your music. I'm told all their parents, my grandparents, were not happy with this arrangement. We didn't have much money when I was little, but my dad gradually became more and more successful. Now my dad does gigs, private lessons, has CDs, traveled with some bands, is a music professor, and wrote a music book that's used in college classes. He is just all about music. It's his life. I'm really proud of him and glad my mom believed in him.
See, I wanted that life, but wasn't good enough of a bass player, so I became a stagehand instead. 17 years in, and I'm now the crew chief at an arena complex, running concerts, spotlighting NBA games, and about to become the production head for a WHL team. You don't have to be a musician to have a career in music. Your kid becoming a pro, or even college athlete.
I'm a teacher. I run into this all the time. I'm gonna be in the NBA. Oh, are you on the school team? No, I got cut. They're bad anyway. Why would I play with them?
This is my poor, deluded son. I try to give him some reality without breaking his spirit. He is the shortest kid in his class and not on any teams, but he's going to be in the NBA, like Stephen Curry, who is also short. Stephen Curry is 6'2". I wish got that reality check. I was 5'6" as a freshman and thought I was huge motherfucker. I was also 220 pounds and strong as fuck and thought I was gonna go pro in the NFL cause of my size. Well, 5'6" is short, and that 220 just made me fat. I didn't realize that was short until all my friends outgrew me, and at age 31, I'm still 5'6". Stranger abductions of children represent less than 1% of all missing child cases, in the US at least. They're mostly runaways or family abductions.
It's the same with sex trafficking. People think it's abductions of children and teens. Those are at the most 3%. The rest are people convinced to do it or people dealing with what we used to call pimps. They might be forced due to addiction or poverty, but it's extremely rare for sex trafficking victims to have been kidnapped.
Your statements are accurate, but one thing gets muddied, so want to add some clarification. More than 3% of sex trafficking victims are children, but only 3% or less are abducted. The vast majority of child trafficking victims are abused through their homes or other environments they are in. Abduction not required.
Kids given drugs at Halloween.
Nobody wants to waste their money on giving kids free drugs. Remember kids, if anyone gives you drugs, say thank you because drugs are expensive.
The look on my mother's face when I declared nobody would be giving me drugs for free. I didn't buy drugs or use any or anything of the sort, but the realization that nobody was passing out their product for free for literally no reason hit my mother like a train that year.
Successfully suing a company for millions. Some Redditors will have you believe that any minor inconvenience should earn you some kind of massive payout, and the comments will assure you that the company will do anything to avoid bad PR.
I mentioned this in another sub tonight, but my mom successfully sued a famous retailer she worked for. They fired her while on workman's comp tar leave. Apparently that's illegal in our state. She took home $250,000 plus healthcare for life. Not millions, but life-changing money, for sure, for her, anyway. What they don't talk about is the BS you go through during a suit. It took almost 10 years. She was constantly being harassed by the other side, forced to go to Dr. Apt's over and over to have the same tests run over and over. It was a long nightmare. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen.
There was this story of a YouTuber called Footless Joe. She's an amputee. She slipped and fell on her stump while at a restaurant. The restaurant didn't put a sign that the floor was greasy and a risk for people. She sued them, but she explained it is so extremely draining and drawn out, and they want to know everything, every detail of your life, whether you think it's relevant or not. She felt humiliated and exhausted among other things, so she settled. She just couldn't do it, and the high road would have been to keep going and try to win, but the cost of it financially and emotionally was too much.
People surviving CPR and waking up immediately acting normal and asking what happened.
People surviving CPR at all. They say to keep doing it because a fractional chance of surviving is always better than certain death.
When doing my first aid course for work, it was emphasized that the person who needed CPR was already dead. We had not failed if they did not live. This was emphasized by one man, returning for second course to keep his certification, had unsuccessfully done CPR on his father.
I was an EMT and they told us they're already dead, so go ahead and break their ribs. If they survive to worry about it hurting, you did them a favor.
Amnesia. It's common in fiction because it's convenient in ways that makes things easy for the writers. For example, explaining why someone's dark past is a secret which can be revealed later at the climax of the story. In real life, it's very rare and doesn't work like people think it does.
I think I've watched every episode of Unsolved Mysteries, and I cannot count the number of episodes with a segment suggesting a missing person had amnesia and was just wandering around in the wild without a clue as to who they were. I guess in the 80s and 90s, this sounded plausible, or was a coping mechanism for people who didn't want to admit the truth about their missing loved one, but some of the stories are so far-fetched, it's hard to believe they believed it even then.
A business becoming profitable within 2 years. Be patient. It takes time. Years. Businesses only fail if they have to be shut down. Keep them alive, ride out the time factor, and enjoy success down the road. I've owned my business going on 16 years. I wasn't about to comfortably support myself until about year 5, and even now I'm incredibly frugal as COVID almost made me lose so much work. Savant abilities in autism. We have Rainmain to thank for that, largely, but there are big questions as to whether the guy this was based on actually should have been diagnosed with something other than ASD. I hate that I got the stupid bitch autism and everyone expects the smart kind, lol. Often people think someone has savant abilities simply because they can't imagine someone with a normal ability to memorize things, putting in the number of hours it takes to, say, memorize every single national flag when, nope, they just spent a lot of time poring over an atlas as a kid because that's what they wanted to do rather than memorizing Pokemon names or whatever, my son in this example.
There are geniuses in the autistic population, but they are not more prevalent than in the normal population. Both can co-occur, but they aren't linked.
Not sure if I'd really say rare, but I think a lot of people think it's common for legislators to introduce bills with the intention of trying to pass them, but for most representatives, they're introducing bills that they know will never pass, so they can show their constituents they stuck to their campaign promises and blame it on the other side when they never even really did anything to even try to get at a hearing. I work in policy, and when I first started, I knew it was bad, but dear God, it's even worse than I thought.
Being awake during a surgery under general anesthesia. Patients worry about it all the time, but I've been doing this 19 years and never seen a real case of this. My dad woke up during anesthesia, scared the crap out of the doctors operating on him. He wanted spaghetti after the surgery and remembers none of this. I've never seen my father eat spaghetti before or since this day. I'm sorry to say this, but your dad is a closeted spaghettist. Plane crashes. I know your lizard brain doesn't like it, but flying is the safest mode of transportation. Edit. Because a lot of people mentioned it, I am specifically referring to commercial jets and the like. Small planes and helicopters are way less safe. Making a living off just your art alone. Musicians, artists, filmmakers, dancers, that whole lot. What we see on TV and in movies are the cream of the crop. Not that they are necessarily the best, mind you. They've just risen up somehow, and are a very small percentage. Most artists of whatever medium will stay in relative obscurity, i.e., you're a regional act. You gain some glint of fame, and yes, admiration, even inspiring others. But when you're not on tour, when you're not in the studio, you're working a job that pays the bills. I think the key to success here is that you find a job you like, are good at, and allows you to do your art without interference. That way, when you're 45 and your band still hasn't broke through, or your art isn't commanding tens of thousands, you're not just stuck stocking shelves at the grocery. Not that there's anything wrong with that, it just pays piss poor. Healthy relationships without putting in work.
It shouldn't be a constant struggle between two people, but so many people expect it to always be smooth sailing and to not need to grow or accommodate or problem solve.
Pearls. Of all the fine stones, I know it classifies differently, but for jewelry, it's basically a stone. It's the one that has to happen in an oyster, which only exist on Earth. Other planets are literally raining diamonds. They're so common, but pearls are probably one of the rarest substances to exist.
My ex ordered blackened oysters at this place in Baton Rouge one time and bit down on a natural pearl. Half of it was blackened and half of it was still all pearlescent. It's still one of my favorite possessions to this day, and I want to get it made into a necklace but can't decide on a setting. Your comment makes me want to revisit this venture.